Experience with teaching students. I haven't run high school courses for developers, but I have taught very many quick check courses for developers, which is a very different experience, very intensive working with a small group. That's also a lot of fun, but different.
So my name is Dave Thomas. It's funny because I don't like saying I do teaching, because actually the reason I do it is because I learn more than they do when I teach. But I've been doing talking and teaching and conferences since about 2000, I guess. Before that, doing some just general mentoring. Probably, I don't know, I haven't got an actual, I don't know this, but I've not heard another one. I think I am teaching the only undergraduate degree session on Elixir in the universe. So I have a section on functional programming Elixir at SMU in Dallas. So that's kind of fun. And that's actually a really revelatory experience, actually. No offense to you, because I know it's different, but just how inadequate a lot of the computer science teaching is in terms of just like genuine CS skills.
So, as you mentioned, I'm Ram. I am, to put it bluntly, I am that guy. You know, the one on the forum who's like, I'm the one who's trying to read through the docs and make sense of it and saying, wait, what do you mean here? And maybe or maybe not it gets revised. But I'm basically the one who, no real formal training. I started programming when I messed up my cousin's graphing calculator game, and I had about 20 minutes to try to fix it. So a lot of my experience and background is, starting fires, putting them out, and
so wait a minute, I have to interrupt you here a little bit. What was the name of that first program that you wrote?
So the game was race car, and I didn't like race cars that much, and I'm pretty sure my cousin didn't either, but I knew that she liked James Bond. So I was like, hey, we'll make a James Bond game.
Got that part again.
Got the title and the part on the screen that says press start. And that was about it.
No, I don't know. What's she missing?
I never found out, and I don't plan to.
He hasn't owned up, in other words. So sorry to interrupt you, Rand.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been basically coming from in essence, the worst possible starting point in terms of, no real formal computer science training. There's things that I know because I read the docs and I tried it enough and broke enough things until it worked.
Can I just make one small observation? Right? Chad Fowler, who is one of the big figures certainly in the old days, as in 3 years ago, on the Ruby side of the industry, but just in general across the industry. He was a music major, and he's a saxophone player. He was working as a gig player in Memphis, I think it was, and he got into programming through video games. Right? He was a big video game player because there's a lot of downtime between gigs, and he started trying to hack video games and got into it that way. No formal training at all. One of the best programmers I know. So that's not a bad entry. It's just a different one. Yeah.
So before we get too much further, us spraying this on Ram at the last minute, it's a scary thing to be sitting on this stage with these big people. Give them some encouragement around the clock.
Try to live up to that, and no promises.
So my name is Bruce Tate, and what's relevant here is I've spent the last 8 months or so, would you say? Probably 6 to 8 months. We've been meeting together. The idea is not just to invite people to a conference and drop them in cold, but drop them into a conference with enough information to be able to sit down and have a conversation with Stu Holloway or Dave Thomas or John Hughes. And I have made a ton of mistakes, so I kind of want to share some of those insights along the way. student.
I'm Stuart Holloway. I never had any intention of being a computer programmer, and I got a job in college computer programming because it paid better than being the gym monitor, which is what I was doing at the time. I was getting a computer science degree, so I can't claim not to have sat in those classes, but I didn't really learn much, and I didn't pay much attention at the time, and not until a lot later. I got into education in 1997, I guess, when I met my wife, and I was working at a software company doing a real-time video analysis security systems. And we were having a lot of trouble with, actually we weren't having that much trouble, but we had questions about concurrent programming with the Win32 API. And I went online in a forum and asked questions, and there were 4 different people who answered my question. And this was a great example of one of those questions that takes 5 seconds to ask and 2 pages of work to answer. And 4 different people put in that work. And they all gave these great answers, and I said to Joey, you know, this weird thing happened at work today. And she said, well, what's the story? I said, well, all 4 of them work at the same company. And she said, well, you should work there. And so I didn't even know what the company did.
Developmental?
It was Developmentor. It was a company that was a developer education and training. And a year later, after 3 failed interviews, a year later, I was training people on technology that I knew, and have kept training as part of what I do as a software developer for 20 years since then. And all 4 of those people are now lifelong friends and people that I met through software, and like kind of the stories that Bruce is telling. Right? Those were the people that inspired me and have continued to inspire me throughout my career.
So if there's ever any doubt, we live in a storytelling profession, and so a panel should not be kind of rote answers and questions that are misguided. These should be stories. And the story that we want to tell today is that we have some tremendous assets and tremendous challenges based on the tools that we are using to teach a completely new, new to us concept for programming. But what I wanted to ask John is, so Haskell is one of the most complex and rich languages in the world. What would you say that Haskell does well to be a teachable language?
So Haskell has become quite a lot more complex in recent years. It was simpler at the time when I spent 6 years teaching its first years. So I think it's a very attractive programming language. I think the functional programming paradigm is very good for teaching people who aren't familiar with programming already. The variables are like the variables in high school math, for example. The functions are like the functions in high school math. So there's a whole lot of the complexity of mutation you don't have to learn. At the same time, teaching Haskell let me give the students more exciting problems than they could have had otherwise. So I certainly showed them higher order functions. I got them to solve quite challenging problems in the lab exercises. So I think it worked very well. There are 1 or 2 things that you might think would be difficult. Like, what about lazy evaluation? Did I tell them about lazy evaluation? I threw in an infinite list here or there. Yes, I used the programming style that lazy evaluation encourages, which is basically you don't worry about the cost of evaluating stuff that you're not going to evaluate anyway. But I think certainly in the first programming course, teaching people not to worry about performance is actually a good thing. What they're struggling with is trying to make the code work at all. So I think that was useful. Lazy evaluation, I think if you don't make a big deal out of it, it's not a problem. Then, of course, there's the famous monad word for doing I/O. But, if you go into monads in regulatory detail, yes, there's a huge amount to learn there. But if you say, this is how you write a file, and you don't make a big deal out of it, it's also not a problem. So I think that worked really nicely. I think it's also good to have a typed language for first year instruction. For example, the designing programs course that Matthias Fleisenberg has worked on, even though they're teaching scheme, they teach students to start by writing down the type. They call it a contract, but it's a type really. And thinking about types is, I think, helpful. Having type errors found for you is helpful. Having Haskell's type error messages is not as helpful. So, because Haskell has a very powerful type system, the error messages can be confusing. Like in the days I was teaching it, if you forgot to pass a parameter to a function that was supposed to return an integer, the error message would say, no instance, none A arrow B. And you learn to interpret that. You knew it meant you forgot a parameter to a function. But I found I had to tell students, when the type checker gives you a message, it means something's wrong. See where in the program it's complaining about and look at it. And if it says none, it may have something to do with numbers. But I was not really able to teach students to interpret the error messages. More recently, Haskell has become more complex, and there have been some changes that are a little controversial from the point of view of educators. In particular, there's something called the FTP, and this is not file transfer protocol, as you might think. This stands for the foldable and traversable prelude. And what's happened is that some of the basic operations, like fold R, have been overloaded. So they used to work over lists, now they work over any kind of container. And overloading is kind of useful and powerful if you know what you're doing. But if you don't, then you can get an error message that says, you meant to pass a list, you passed a number or something. And it says, ambiguous type variable A in class foldable. And that's more difficult to explain to students.
Have you ever been tempted to produce a subset that would be easier as a tool to teach?
So that was done in the Netherlands. The Hebrew language is a kind of subset of Haskell, designed to be easier to teach. When we taught Haskell, we still teach Haskell Challenge, it replaced ML. And I discovered that many of the students really hated ML. They had an I hate ML club, believe it or not. They never had an I hate Haskell club, which I think gives us some credit for the teaching. But it was very, very harmful, I think, to give first-year students the impression that this language is for teaching. But after the end of this course, you can forget it. It's never going to be useful again. I think it's really important, even if you have to teach a slightly more complex language, to teach something that can go with them as they develop and grow as developers. Because they have a very different emotional attachment to the language in that case.
Right, so as a dyslexic student, Lisp was always hell for me, right? Like counting parentheses and the prefix notation, I kind of felt like I was talking to Yoda, right? You want to have them, or whatever, But, so what do you think about, so when you were teaching at developmental, that wasn't with the functional language, right?
That's correct.
So what experience have you found, what have you found that's changed as you've moved from that tool chain to Clojure? And how have you had to grow as a teacher to teach Clojure?
In a lot of ways, it was kind of growing backwards, because I find that it's easier to teach beginners languages that are considered challenging because they haven't learned a set of bad habits in industry.
MIT, right? Teaching Lisp first, right?
So, but also, I think that when languages are expressive enough to let you really focus on what you're doing, then you have some choices inside of that. And John was sort of alluding to some of this. I mean, one of the choices is you could have a teaching subset language. That's a way to actually have the focus baked in. But you don't actually have to do that, right? You can take on the problems in a certain order and say, you know what, we're going to have this problem that in order to solve it, you need to know these three pieces. And a critical aspect of being a good programmer is being able to focus on the thing you're focusing on and not have to focus on, anything else. And also to learn when you get that cryptic error message, how to back up from that and get back to a place where you're focused. Because when you're actually working on systems for real, you're going to hit bizarre things that you don't understand. And so having to back up and analyze that situation and recover is an incredibly valuable skill. And while I have the mic, I just want to say that I would pay money to have an audio file of John shouting error messages. The thing that's him most
Can you do my later first?
Absolutely. I will relearn enough Emacs Lisp to wire that back into my development environment so he can shout at me when I...
Ringtones, baby. It's all ringtones. Yeah, so Dave, you have the interesting perspective of kind of coming into Ruby and then bringing a lot of people kicking and screaming with you, me for one, right?
No one was kicking and screaming.
I was a little bit.
Not after I beat you up.
Right. So, but what was interesting is, right after Ruby, you have, well, not right after Ruby, but as Elixir was starting to get a little bit of traction, you started to write about it, and there was this meme that Elixir was Ruby for functional programming, right? So you had to dispel a few myths. But what made Elixir easy to teach for you?
I think really I can't add too much to what these guys have said. In that my experience has been, well, first of all, the thing that made Elixir attractive to me is that I was looking for a functional-ish language, and I'm never going to say that Elixir is a functional language, but a functional-ish language, so I could show many of the concepts of functional programming, but in a somewhat easier to digest package, with all due respect, than say Haskell. Simply because the cost of entry is considerably less, and it kind of looks like Ruby, so you can kind of fake people out of it and say, hey, guess what, this kind of looks like Ruby, you can do it. So that was why I was attracted to it. That plus the fact that it is lipstick on a very, very attractive and fast pig, right? The Beam is a remarkable engine, considering particularly its age. I mean, it's stood up unbelievably well. And I think my view of the future is, well, clearly the future is going to be concurrent, parallel, and consist of millions of things talking to each other. And really, the only widespread platform I've seen that will support that so far is the Beam. And so something that looks attractive but runs on the Beam was a really great opportunity. Having said that, I think the closeness to Ruby has been a big downside. Because when I teach developers who have come from a Java or a Ruby or something like that, then they basically end up writing Ruby in Elixir.
They've got a golden hammer.
Well, it's not just that. It's as Stu said, you've got to kind of like step back and come at it from a different direction if you're going to do it, quote, right. And once you've basically put in your dues, right, you've spent the 8 years learning to be an OO programmer, you're damned if you're going to throw that away, you know? And so you try to make everything look the way it used to look. And that has been the biggest hurdle. I find that not surprisingly, I guess, the students that I teach at college, the undergraduates, at SMU, for some reason, there must be some kind of like sadist that does curriculum, but they're taught C++ as their main language. And not surprisingly, they really haven't picked up any habits at all. And so they actually learn Elixir really well. Graduate students who've been out in the industry and have done Java or JavaScript or whatever else, they struggle a lot more because of that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I just kind of went through this kind of mental gymnastics of trying to think of baggage that people carry along with them, right? So, one of the first things that I tried to do in moving from C++ to Java was I tried to do my own like memory management, right? And then when I moved from Java to Ruby, I tried to write dependency injection. When I moved from Ruby to Elixir, I tried to write inheritance. So
right.
Don't at me.
But let me go back to one point both of these guys mentioned,
Sure.
these error messages, right? Which I think, if you're trying to teach a language, is unbelievably important, right? And it's interesting when you watch developers who come from another language who come to Elixir, and they don't read the error messages. And they don't read them because they're used to having error messages that mean nothing. So as far as they're concerned is, error message means you've made a mistake, go back to what you did and fix it, right? And so you'll ask them, what does the message actually say? And they'll go, I don't know. You know? And you point to them and it says, look here, it says here, on line 14, you used a variable that doesn't exist. And they're, oh, you know. I think error messages are actually a really crucial part of an experience, because what you need to do is help developers understand that if they're not generating errors, then they're not programming, right? You have to get into the habit of not treating errors as being a criticism, but just as being a part of the overall process, right? Tests fail. If they don't fail, you're not writing code. You know, you get compilation errors. If you don't get compilation errors, then, I mean, you're a way better typist than I am for nothing else. So good error messages, I think, are part of the process of helping developers understand that this is not a quest for perfection. It's just a quest to try and get something, you know, further along than it was.
Yeah, very cool. So, I completely agree with that. But you know, it doesn't matter what I think, right? So at some point, we teachers, we're speaking with conjecture, right? What we need to do is ask someone that doesn't have object-oriented experience what learning a functional language is like. So what did you think about learning Elixir?
Error messages are the best and worst thing. If I have something, I'm like, okay, yeah, this should work, this should do that, and then I run it, and it says compile error. Okay, looks good. First, I had to sort of remember, wait, it tells you where it is. So we check back, okay, line 13, parentheses. Okay, fine, here's a parentheses. And after sort of these syntax errors, these error messages not only help you sort of, basically to me, sort of when I code, I'm sort of taking this mess that I have up here and throwing it down onto, you know, the file as best as I can. And I know it's a mess. I know that I'm thinking of going one way, which probably the other, and these error messages that pop up prod me to one direction or another. Or, you know, there was a cipher little exercise that I was working on. And I was going at it from one way, and I spent a good 30 minutes, an hour just going, oh yeah, all right, yeah, this will work, yeah, this will be great. Then I run it, and it compiles, and it throws an error. Okay, all right, I check, and it's a very basic error, but as I'm fixing that error, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going about this completely wrong. Why do I have all this? I don't need this function, I don't need this extra stuff. It doesn't matter. So the errors that pop up not only serve to, of course, point to that problem, but it gives you a chance to sort of reevaluate your code. I don't necessarily see the error as a, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing ever. I see it as a, okay, what are you really trying to do here? I don't understand you. Try saying it again.
Can I interrupt just quickly? Because I want to give you just like a little bit of perspective here. Audience. He said that there's this idea in my head which is a real mess, and I put it down in a file. He types it in, and it's a mess, and then works on it. How many people here who are experienced programmers do that? Thank you very much. That's what we all do, right? It's the act of communicating is the way we clarify our thinking, always.
And I want to get another question in real quick while we've got you, Ran. So what are the features of Elixir that make it fun for you to learn? So let me give you a little bit of background here. So for Ran, Elixir is pure joy, right? So when he hits not just a problem, you know, not just when he nails a problem, but when he gets a passing test, he jumps up, throws his hands up, and dances. Now, if you can call that dancing.
I'd rather not think about that. It's not one of my finest moments.
Okay. It's always your finest moment. But what are the features of the language that make it easy to learn?
So to me, I hated to love math. And this is, I'm not sure how well I said that, but you know, I was the kid who would be in class and you know, put some function up on the board and we're sitting there and okay, you square root both sides and that's plus or minus, this, that, and the third. And I was the kid who would sit there and watch it and sort of follow along, try to get ahead and then realize I don't know what I'm doing. And watching it transform from one to the other was almost like magic. Oh my goodness, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of it? And one thing that I have run into in various scripting languages I've worked with, a little bit of OO languages, and let me preface this by saying I don't know enough to know whether it's the language or the author. Because there are cases where you look at a script and you say, oh yeah, it's from Java. This is how you wrap into Windows 7 to uninstall Java 6. And you look at it and you can't make the details of it. But you have a coworker who's found something that to you looks like it does the same thing. But it doesn't. And one thing that I found in Elixir is that if it gets too complicated, then probably not the right way to do it. If you're looking at whatever function or sub-function that you've written, and it's getting to 15, 18, 20 lines, maybe you should stop, take a look, say, okay, what am I really trying to do here? Because just like those functions in math, really, this ginormous polynomial equation is really just all these little parts. And when you separate out these little parts, it all flows. It's very elegant. And that's something that I've seen in Elixir that I have not really seen in many, if any, other languages.
Yeah, so one of the cool moments in working with someone like Ram is, when I'm kind of ripping and walking through something in the console just to kind of show the basic concepts, and Ram says, well, can you pipe that? Or, well, what would happen if you passed a nil in there? Could I shape the function this way? Those are the little bits of joy. And so to kind of hear him up on the stage with this group kind of reasoning through what makes a language special for the first time, that's really cool. So I'd like to take a pause and open to questions for Ram or any of the other gentlemen on the stage about learning functional programming. We have a mic over here.
Okay. Since no one else will ask this, one thing that at this point, I'm starting to get a better understanding of how to deal with is just the torrent of information with regards to what tools to use, how to use them. Oh, you should use this thing versus that thing, and then there's a whole thread that's sticking on the top, 500 posts long about the dark thing versus the midnight thing. And when you're jumping in cold, you're sitting here and you're like, I just want to know how to make this work.
So I want to make a point about this. So one of the things that we have missed on as the Elixir community is when we are teaching, when we are explaining concepts, we don't have to make the whole universe of Clojure or Haskell or Elixir available. One of the things that's extremely helpful is to limit that universe. And Anna does a wonderful job. I don't do such a wonderful job of teaching in that way. Typically I'll start with a student and Anna says, okay, what Bruce means is, and then she'll slow me down. But Ram just kind of, Ram's a really bright guy. And when we move too fast, when we throw too much data at it, it's not constructive.
Well,
so we have some.
I'm really not even the best case of this. because, because I've enjoyed computer stuff, I've poked around on forums and the like, and I've developed an eye for, oh wait, no, that's just another flame war and another flame war, and here's what I'm looking for. But if you have someone jumping into it new, they're not gonna know, skip to page 6. And it's things like that that I know personally early on stopped me from jumping into certain
I think
languages.
that there's a really interesting secondary point there, which is that as the way we teach developers, we are probably the only arts course, and I still think that teaching programming is as much art as anything else. We're the only arts course where we never actually look at existing art. Right? We only teach new stuff. We always say, get out there and create something. We never say, go out and read something. And there are so many great works of programming that you can read, And given that, I think if we were to teach people critical skills to read both code and stuff about code, if we were to give people reading lists of the great papers that really everybody needs to read, right? And understand the why, right? If you were to do that, even stupid stuff like there's like a 3-paragraph go-to considered harmful paper, right? Which set an entire trend in the industry. Nobody actually understands why he wrote that. If you understand why Dexter wrote it, then you actually understand the go-to isn't actually harmful, just it really gets in the way of his program proving. That's, you've got to understand these kind of things. And so I think we need to get better at showing people that there's a history, and it doesn't have to be ancient history, it can be just something written last week, that they can be critical of and read critically.
Yeah, create just curation of content. It's tremendously helpful. So we have some great questions back here. So
this question isn't specifically to learning Elixir, but the most common and way into career development these days, I think, is still getting a CS degree. And I'm wondering if the panel has any thoughts about alternative ways. I feel like there's a gap between a CS degree and then what I do every day, which is basically CRUD databases. And I feel like that doesn't necessarily require a whole university experience. It might affect the pipeline that we're concerned about as far as diversity goes and things like that. And I wonder if the panel has any general thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm.
who wants to take that?
I think we all have points to that.
All right. How long ago? I think that, first of all, I was remarkably lucky. I did a university degree in England back in the 70s. It was the second year that ran the program, so they were agile in that they were very happy to rock and roll with things. I came away with a really, really solid grasp of fundamentals. I look at the programs that are being offered now, and this is not specific to where I'm teaching, it's pretty much universal.